Welcome to the Peachtree Podcast. Peachtree Learning Center is a nonprofit in Middle Tennessee dedicated to training and discipling students in all the fine arts to become excellent and skilled in order to spread the kingdom of God into the world of the arts. On this podcast, we will discuss topics designed to encourage, uplift, educate, and equip people to proclaim the kingdom more deeply in their own families and communities. Welcome back to the Peachtree Podcast, and thank you for joining us again. Today I get to interview a dear friend of mine, Lori Vaughn. She's from this area, but has spent quite a bit of time overseas and then has come back to us and has been a true gift to Peachtree in this season. And I wanted to have her on for this episode to specifically cover a few topics that are tangential to Peachtree, but want to have her come back later and talk more about her experiences overseas and how art and artistic pursuits have taken her around the world, proclaiming truth into spaces that are hard and difficult. But today, we're mostly going to cover kind of how art shaped her life early on and go from there. So welcome back, Lori.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm so thankful that you are able to come and speak to us. I wanted to just dive right in, and I want to hear about how your parents found out you were artistic. Like, how did art come to be a part of your life early on?
I don't remember a time that art wasn't a part of my life. And I was talking to my parents about this actually today. And my dad said, well, you've been doing it since you could hold a pen or a paintbrush. And that's the truth of it. I don't remember a time that I wasn't painting or drawing or creating something. I made my own paper dolls when I was little. I designed houses on graph paper. There's a picture of me at 4 years old at an easel holding a paintbrush. So it's just always been who I am. It's who God created me to be.
That's beautiful. I love the pictures in my head as you're talking of little tiny Lori with her curly blonde hair dancing around with a paintbrush. That's beautiful. So do you have any specific inspirations you think back about, people that helped inculcate that, or people that helped deepen your love for that along the way?
Well, I would say, number one, it was my parents, because they did allow me those creative experiences. They allowed me to have those materials, as messy as they were, to explore. They put up with my cluttered bedroom that had all kinds of found objects and materials because I could just create. So my parents, first of all, were the heart of my creative journey because they allowed it and they sought out opportunities for me. I had a very sweet art teacher, a private art instructor growing up. She not only was my art teacher, but when I was quite a bit younger, she taught a missions class at my church, and I went to that class every week. And so if you know me, you know my heart is for missions and for art and for children. And so it was just really beautiful to see how God has woven all those things together in my life. And Miss Towns was a huge part of that. And so I was very grateful to work with her and to learn some very important skills through that. And of course, I pursued art through middle school and high school and sought out opportunities to do art in those spaces.
That's so sweet. Part of the initial broadcast that we did was an interview with Shani Smith, who started Peachtree, and the word she brought to the table was impart. And I'm hearing that in what you're saying, that this was not just a teacher, this was somebody who imparted the spirit behind the art to you. And, and you grabbed it with both hands and have run with it ever since.
Absolutely.
So I love that picture. That's very thoughtful. So you knew from early on that this was not just a hobby for you. This was something you were just it was just flowing out of who you were.
Definitely.
So when you got older, you went to college, you got a degree in art, and then tell me how, as a young adult, you started to kind of use that to craft a life.
Well, and I'll say this too, because I think it's good for viewers to hear. When I first enrolled in college, I thought, well, I can't be an artist. They don't make any money. I can't be a teacher. They don't make any money. And again, it was kind of that worldly view of, even though as I was a believer, a strong believer at that time, but I thought, well, I've got to pursue something that I'm going to be able to make a living at. And I feel like that's the Lord's great sense of humor of saying, don't say never, because by the end of that first semester, I declared art education as my focus. And so that's what I did. And I love the Lord's guiding in that, because it was so much of who he created me to be, that it was evident. Art education was the path that he was going to use for me to step into those spaces. So
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thought. I love the idea of changing the phrase that we use for our children from making a living to making a life, because I think making a life is way more important.
Right.
But I think it's easy, especially in the last century, to make a living the goal as opposed to making a life.
Right.
And really, we need to be trying to help children see how to make a life and look ahead, and not just how am I going to pay the bills.
Absolutely.
But before I have any bills, how am I going to live my life? Kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So that's beautiful. I love that. I love that he taught you that quickly.
Yes. And as an artist, as a teacher, and I love children, and so I really wanted to impart what the Lord has shown me, how he had gifted me. I wanted to impart that into the lives of children as well. So that was a huge part of using that gifting. But in addition to that, ministry and missions was at the core of me. And I felt at a very young age called into that. And so I love how God took those unique giftings in me and wove those together. And so even though at those stages, yes, I was painting, which is my form of art. I was painting on my own, not as much as I would have loved to, but I was also being creative in these other spaces. So through teaching, through ministry, those opportunities allowed for a great deal of creativity. It just wasn't in the form of painting.
Right.
So,
well, and then you've branched out from there. I know at Peachtree you teach tons of drama too. You teach all of our drama classes from intro to drama, where they're making their own sets and coming up with their own ideas for costumes and props, to up through the high school art, which is actually getting to where we can delve into some serious drama with them. You've done a great job coaching them the last few years. And well, let me back up and say, art took you overseas pretty quickly. So tell us just a little bit about how you ended up overseas.
Sure. So out of college, I taught in the public school system. I left that and taught or became very involved in children's ministry, and even found myself back in Cookeville for a couple of years before I went overseas. And I was involved in children's ministry, but also taught a couple of art classes at Peachtree. So my experience with Peachtree is lengthy, which is wonderful. Yes. And I knew from a very early age that I wanted to serve the Lord overseas. There was no question in my mind. But I didn't know what avenue to take through that. And God allowed an opportunity for me to serve him overseas as an international teacher. So I served in a Christian school with our focus of sharing the gospel through international education. And so I had the opportunity to teach art and drama and Bible also in the school that I served in, which was a dream come true, really. It was seeing God's plan fulfilled in my life through that. And really that's when I embraced the theater portion of my creativity. I did things growing up, but being able to actually direct was so much fun, and I enjoyed it. And again, kind of tapped into this other piece of creativity that it awakened it, I guess you could say, which was really exciting.
Well, it's a visual art. It's just a living, moving visual art. But putting together props and sets and costumes is still very visual.
Absolutely.
So it absolutely taps into the same parts of your brain, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely.
That's beautiful. So I've also seen you do some commissioned pieces, and tell me a little bit about how that works, or how, I know that's a piece of income, but more than that, it's a way of letting your influence kind of be in other spaces. You've done commissions for public schools and commissions for private people. Speak to that just a little bit, because that's a fascinating facet, I think, of being an artist that many people don't think exists today. I feel like people don't even think about that being a way of having an income stream, but still being kind of autonomous.
Commissioned work is really interesting. The murals that I did for the public school were so special to me, not only as a former public school teacher, stepping into that space and being able to leave my mark, I guess you could say, but really as I was painting those pieces, it gave me an opportunity to pray over those kids in the school. It gave me an opportunity to create something that I felt like was beautiful, reflecting the nature of God in a secular space. And so when I'm able to create art in a secular space like that, it still gives me an opportunity to speak truth over the space,
Absolutely.
even if it is visual and not in words. Other commissions, canvas pieces, that kind of thing that I create, it's so individual. It depends on what the person wants out of the piece. If they want something that is very specific, like, would you please paint this photo of XYZ? It's really a personal thing. And so when I work with a client, I want to capture what they're seeing in their mind.
Right.
And that's very challenging. Sometimes it can be very much harder than even just creating my own work, because I so want to please them through the work that they're commissioning. But it also is an opportunity to say, this is how I see your vision, and I am excited to see you enjoy it after it's complete. And that probably is one of my favorite parts of releasing that piece to the person and saying, I pray that it's all that you've desired, but also seeing them enjoy it. It brings a lot of joy.
Oh, I'm always amazed as someone who could barely draw a stick figure with a ruler. I'm always amazed to see what you can come up with on a piece of canvas. Tiny paintings, big paintings. At our Christmas marketplace, you always have such beautiful pieces.
Thank you.
I've come away with at least a couple every year so far, because I just love the way your art specifically is bold and beautiful, and the shapes you create and the textures in your painting are they're just inspiring to me. I have a couple on my wall to look at every day. And I feel like art in that way has come into my home as even a conduit for the Spirit of God to continue to touch me through you, just hanging on my wall. I think about you, and I think about the Lord, and it's kind of, I guess, created an awareness in me of the importance of having good things like that on my walls. I don't have a lot of prints, and so when I was decorating early on, I ended up doing a lot of scripture on my walls or that kind of thing, which I love. But I've loved being able to bring in original art and put that up. And it's just so much more special than just buying. I mean, I do have prints on my wall too, but it's so very special to have original pieces of art. I have one painting that my grandfather did of the crucifixion. Pieces of that material came from his land. So that kind of thing it's like a legacy piece. It's not just a piece of art that I bought and will go out in the yard sale someday. Like, this will be something my children have, and hopefully my grandchildren, and they'll be able to speak back to his faith. And I think about that with the paintings I've gotten of yours already, just that these are going to go to people in my family as legacy. And that's the kind of legacy I want them to have, is beautiful creativity encapsulated on pieces of canvas, but that speak truth. Right. A couple of them I've bought have been specifically gospel-centered, just because I love the way you work that in. So we have a piece hanging in our lobby right now that Lori did, that we ended up just buying for Peachtree's lobby, because it just so encapsulates everything we're doing. Tell us about that one a little bit.
Yeah, I would love to. When I create art on my own without it being a commissioned piece, when I'm just creating art, and where does my inspiration come from? What does that look like? It's 100% Holy Spirit driven. And I want to make that point, because when I am most connected with my artwork, honestly, is when it's been inspired by the Lord. Yeah. And so it doesn't necessarily have to have a Christian theme or message. Right. But it has that inspiration from Him. And that particular piece that's in the lobby came to me last January, February, March. The ideas were starting to perculate. Right. And then through March and April, I painted it. And I so want to see creatives who love Jesus really using that gift to worship Him. Yes. That is my heart in teaching art even now, which has probably changed a lot even from when I started teaching many years ago. But I really want to see worship through visual art, through dance, through music in such an authentic way. And so this painting is really all about that. So when you look at the painting, it has a stained glass window in the back. And for me, stained glass windows have been a theme in my art for about 20 years. because the colors are so beautiful, and it just speaks to me, honestly. Yeah. We could spend 15 minutes talking about that. I won't.
I have the same experience.
Oh, I love it. So I have the stained glass window in the background with a dancer and a worshiper and a artist paint palette and a paintbrush that's flowing as if it's cloth flowing through the painting. And it is all about using our creative gifts to worship the Lord. That is what this painting is all about.
You have a singer at the bottom with his hands raised.
Yes.
You have angel wings on the sides that just signify this presence of God coming in and inhabiting the praises of his people.
Absolutely.
How I see
That's
it every time.
exactly the heart
beautiful.
Behind it. Yes. So that piece of artwork wasn't initially commissioned. It wasn't a piece that somebody said, I want you to do this. It was just inspired by the Lord. And so when I create in those spaces of spending time worshiping and the Lord inspires an idea and I start painting, that is my favorite kind of art.
Yes.
That is when I'm most excited about creating.
Yes. And you can do that. I've seen you do that in times of worship, just in a worship time, being able to listen to the Spirit and tap into what he would like to have visualized from that experience too. That's a beautiful piece of what you do.
Yeah. I'm very thankful for it. And I didn't really understand that when I was younger. That came to me about 15 years ago. And part of it was just being in a space, a church community, a fellowship that encouraged creativity, encouraged that. And so it gave me this opportunity to paint in worship. I'm like, oh, this is it. This is, I can do this. This is really how I see my gifting coming out even more. And so I now in turn want to inspire others to do the same.
It's beautiful, beautiful manifestation of the creativity of God, and even in worship while people are worshiping. So, well, I think this is probably the length of time we love to cut this off, but we're going to stick around and do a little more talking and have another episode in the future. But thank you very much for
thank you so
talking
much
today
for
about
having
this
me.
topic. It's been great to have you, and
I appreciate it.
Always love getting to work with you at Peachtree. So thank you for being there.
It is
it's a
such an
spot.
honor. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. To support this podcast, please go follow us on your podcast platform of choice. And if you're interested in knowing more about the work of Peachtree, please go visit our website at PeachtreeLearningCenter.com for more information.